The Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents Epic Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host,
Laurel Tague. Welcome, everybody, to the Epic Voyages radio show on www.inceptionradionetwork.com. This is Laurel Tague, and my guest tonight has been with us before, Dr. Aaron Judkins. We're going to be talking tonight about a very interesting artifact in New Mexico that Aaron has had the great pleasure to see firsthand, and he's got a DVD and a YouTube video on it, and we're going to be giving you references to that. Let me tell you a little bit about Aaron, first of all. Aaron is he has a doctorate in biblical archaeology, and he lives in the North Texas area. He's an author, an explorer, and an archaeologist. Aaron is actually credited with mapping the longest continuous dinosaur trail in the Western Hemisphere, and I believe one that has human footprints in the caliche alongside of it. Aaron can set me straight on that. He's been in the U.S. and Israel. He's been all over the world in archaeological digs. He's been on the History Channel, and we have some surprise announcements later in the show about Aaron that I'm very excited about talking about. But let's welcome Aaron tonight, and we're going to be talking about the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, which is about 30 or 40 miles south of Albuquerque in a mountain range, an 80-ton boulder. Aaron, how are you doing tonight?
Hi, Laurel. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on the broadcast.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. It's my pleasure. Tell us a little bit about how you first heard about the Decalogue stone and what made you want to go check into it.
Well, I was doing a radio show, and I had a caller call in live, and they said, what do you know about the Decalogue stone? And I scratched my head and paused, and I said, well, I'm not sure, never heard of it. Incidentally, I had a colleague not too long after who was showing me some pictures of some strange writing that was out in the New Mexico desert. So I asked him, I said, is this has anything to do with what they're calling the Decalogue stone? He said, well, I think that's right. He said, we went out there to look at it, and I don't know what it is, but here's some pictures. Maybe you can make sense out of it. And so I was very intrigued, and I began to do some research into it and decided to make a documentary to delve into what was behind this mysterious stone. As a matter of fact, Laurel, the natives over in that area of the U.S., near Los Lunas, New Mexico, refer to it as the Mystery Stone. And so I decided to go see what it was all about.
And it's not really easy to get to, right? I mean, it's not like it's hidden, but you have to kind of really know where you're going. I found one site online that actually has the GPS coordinates published for it. And yet that disturbs me a little bit because it seems like also being out there in the middle of nowhere, it's subject to vandalism issues. Is that not right?
Well, it's very hard to get to. You have to have a permit to actually get out on the land. It borders Isoleta Indian Reservation land, BLM land, and private property ranch land. So it's really checkerboarded in there, and we had to go through the proper channels of the state to get the proper permits to be on there, which we did. It's still quite difficult to get to, and the cell reception is nearly just non-existent out there. There's no water. It's out in the desert, and it's very, very hard to find. I probably would not have found it had I not had a guide to take me right there. But once you get in there, it's you understand, where it is, and it's on a mountain called Hidden Mountain, and so this mountain is kind of tucked away behind a bigger mountain, and it's just really hard to see until you get right up on it, and then boom, there it is. So it's pretty interesting. But the natives over there call it the Mystery Stone for good reason, because it has some very strange writing on there that shouldn't be out there in the New Mexico desert.
Okay, so Aaron, tell us the story about the Decalogue stone.
Well, the Los Lunas Decalogue. Now, let's, define Decalogue for people who don't know what that term means. Decalogue just means it's a reference to the Ten Commandments. Now, some people call this the Ten Commandments rock. So Decalogue just means Ten Commandments. So the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, or Mystery Stone, is a large boulder basically on the side of Hidden Mountain near Los Lunas, New Mexico, that has an ancient inscription on it carved into the side panel of the boulder. This boulder is out of basalt. It's about 80 tons, and this inscription is actually in Paleo-Hebrew. Now, that's very interesting, Laurel, because Paleo-Hebrew went out of favor around 500 BC. And the Hebrew actually changed formats into what we know as the modern block Hebrew, which is still used today. So when you see modern Hebrew, that's actually what you're seeing. Paleo Hebrew is an ancient form of Hebrew, and it's basically written in character style letters. There's no vowels; all the vowels are inferred. But we can go back and look at other ancient inscriptions that are written in Paleo-Hebrew, and to understand that, okay, this is indeed what this is. The Phoenicians actually used Paleo-Hebrew. And so basically this is a real controversial stone, in that some claim that this inscription is pre-Columbian. In other words, before the time of Columbus in 1491, 1492, and therefore may be proof of early Semitic contact with the North Americas. So that's where this whole thing really gets interesting, because if that's true, that writing shouldn't be out there. And so what exactly is this, and why is it there? And those are questions we went out to seek to answer.
Well, when did someone stumble on this? I mean, obviously stumble is a bad term, because it's literally in the middle of the back country and not that easy to find. When did someone first become aware of this, Aaron?
Well, the first recorded mention of the stone is in 1933. A professor, Dr. Frank Hibben, he was an archaeologist from the University of New Mexico, and he was led out there by an unnamed Indian guide who claimed to have found it when he was a boy in the 1880s. Now, this is 1933. Dr. Hibben went out to look at it. But before that, it's interesting that that also in the 1800s, that someone had found it, and basically, now there's no written documentation on this, but it was claimed that a man who lived in the area of Los Lunas, he was a resident, he said his grandfather had seen this stone way back in the 1800s, predating the 1880s date. So there's at least verbal confirmation that people had seen it, but written documentation was about 1933 when Professor Hibben went out. And he was one of the first ones to really kind of take a crack at what this thing was. He recognized it as being Paleo-Hebrew, but didn't really quite get the translation of the stone. He wasn't able to really nail it down. He was really unsure about what this thing was, and it just basically went unstudied. For years, basically. So the man who found it back in the 1800s, his name was Simon Cerna, and he was born in 1829, and he said his father had seen the rock in 1800. So we're going back quite a ways, but Professor Hibben went out there to look at it, and it basically went unnoticed, for the most part, unrecognized and understudied for years and years, up until about the mid-1940s. And Dr. Pfeiffer, who was an authority on the Old Testament for Harvard University, and there was a man who went out in 1948 who lived in Albuquerque. He was a resident out there, and he took an interest in the rock. He had heard about it, and he went out there to take photographs to send it to Dr. Pfeiffer. But what we know, what he did was something very damaging. As just an amateur, he wanted to get a really good photograph, Laurel. So what he did was he took and scratched out the inscription on this basalt rock that is, that's volcanic in nature. It's had this dark patina, which is a desert varnish over the rock. Mm-hmm. And even Professor Hibben said in 1933, when he first visited the rock, now I didn't know this initially, but I verified it through firsthand information, who had known Dr. Hibben when he was still alive. And he asked Dr. Hibben about this stone, the mystery stone, the Decalogue stone. And he said, tell me about what you saw. And Professor Hibben told him, he said, when I saw it in 1933, it had the desert patina covering the inscription. Not only that, but it had lichen, which is a little biological material that's over. It's like a club moss that grows over the rock. It had lichen growing over the inscription as well. Now, if that's true, which I don't doubt, that means that inscription's old, because to get desert patina over rock and to get lichen growing on rock, it takes a long time. That shows antiquity, and we know that through science you can go back and say it takes X number of years for this desert varnish to be over this rock and this lichen to grow over it. But what this man did, William McCart, in 1940.